You're listening to How to Stan, the podcast all about both specific fandoms and fandom culture as a whole. For more information about the show and the other show that I do, 17 Karat K-Pop, visit 17karatkpop.weebly.com. You can also go to 17karatkpop.weebly.com/howtostan for more specific information about this podcast. Enjoy the show! You are listening to a series of How to Stan episodes called Betrayals. Betrayals will cover different stories of times when fans felt disillusioned with their favorite celebrities, whether it be realizing that their idol didn't actually sing their own songs, to realizing that a child prodigy was actually not the child prodigy the media had claimed she was, to times where an entirely fake persona was crafted by celebrities. How fans react to that and why they react that way will be explored through a lot of different contexts through each of these stories. When thinking about major lip-sync scandals in pop culture history, three main instances come to mind, and although each of those stories has some broad similarities, including the fact that fans felt really thrown for a loop due to the lip-syncing that they had not expected, the outcomes could not have been more different. So this episode is going to try to unpack why that is the case, why there was such a different reception to lip-syncing revelations for three different artists over time. Starting with the story of Milli Vanilli. These two guys named Rob and Fab teamed up to form this musical duo called Milli Vanilli, and they were produced and managed by a guy named Frank Farian, who plays a huge role in this narrative, so stay tuned for that. But before I get to that, Milli Vanilli was really mostly just popular for one song. It was their one hit, Girl You Know It's True, which went platinum 6 times in the USA in the span of a year. From 1989 to 1990, in that range, it went platinum 6 times. That hit song also led to their record deal in the USA with Arista Records. The song also went number 1 in Germany, where Rob is from. The song led them to become the Best New Artist winners at the Grammys in 1989, and they won 3 American Music Awards. So they had a really promising start to their career, really, after this song kicked off and the popularity just soared. But that all really came crashing down a lot sooner than anyone had anticipated after a performance in Connecticut for MTV. When, in July of 1989, Milli Vanilli performed and the backing tape looped when it wasn't supposed to, and revealed they had been lip-syncing. The members of Milli Vanilli then were planning to just reveal the truth about the fact they had lip-synced not just that performance, but every past performance, and go even further and just reveal, really, they weren't even the ones singing. But before they could spill the beans, Frank rushed to control the narrative and have his own press conference to explain what happened. November 15th of 1990, Frank officially came clean about everything and revealed the whole past of this project and previous projects, because it turns out that Rob and Fab had not actually sang any Milli Vanilli song, including the big hit Girl You Know It's True. They were the face of the album covers and the public appearances, but the voice was someone else entirely. The duo who actually sang for Rob and Fab were deemed by Frank to just be not attractive enough to be famous singers, and so Frank set out to find and recruit 2 very attractive men to instead be the face of the band, and then have someone with better vocal chops, in his opinion, do the actual singing. And Frank revealed he had actually done this plot before with a separate group. He started this German disco group in the 70s, and this was a group where Frank himself was actually the singer, but the image he put forth was of a group of 4 Caribbean singers. So this was not a one-time thing. Frank had kind of gotten into the habit of mixing the singer versus the public face of who he was promoting. As for Arista Records' role in all of this, they claimed they have no idea. They had no idea that Rob and Fab didn't actually sing their own stuff when they signed the contracts, and so they really wanted no part in this, which was solidified as their view when they destroyed the master files to Girl You Know It's True. Although Frank had tried to really control the narrative and take it away from Rob and Fab by coming forward before them and not letting them share their side of the story as much, or at least have their side of the story get the same attention that his did because it came first, Rob and Fab did call their own press conference to open up about their view of what happened, and then they did give back their Grammy that they earned. They did keep the American Music Awards, since that was considered more of a fan-voted contest, and so they were considered to still have deserved that, which is an interesting variable to think about here. Anyway, so Rob and Fab did try to release some sort of comeback album in 1993, and did eventually get to perform it on TV, but that just tanked. The album didn't do much for them. They were a one-hit wonder officially due to this whole incident that became infamous. In 1991, Frank released an album called The Moment of Truth, which was by the real voices behind Milli Vanilli. Fab, one of the faces of Milli Vanilli, teamed up with one of the voices for Milli Vanilli for a project called Face Meets Voice, a Milli Vanilli experience. As for Rob, he went on to become a motivational speaker, actually, about overcoming times of adversity. So he did find a way to take back the narrative about what happened and talk about the ways that the music industry can really mess with artists and betray them. He looks back on his time in Milli Vanilli positively in a way and doesn't really regret it, because he views him as having done what a musician should do, which is make fans' lives more fulfilled and provide all this happiness through live shows. So regardless of if he was singing live or not, he felt like he was giving fans the joy they wanted, singing a song they loved, so regardless of who actually sang it, that song was delivered to them, the performances were delivered to them, and all of that. Rob actually, though, was hiding a lot of demons, and he passed away at 33 of an overdose. Fans didn't necessarily stay rooting for Rob or Fab after the news came to light that Rob and Fab were phonies, essentially. Fans actually filed lawsuits, and around 10 million people total became eligible for music purchase reimbursements because they were so outraged by feeling like they had been lied to by this whole situation. Rob always claimed that him and Fab were also duped, and that they didn't know when they signed their contracts with Frank that he wasn't going to let them sing. Because what Frank would do is he would let them record the vocals for their music, but then he would also have the real voices of Milli Vanilli record the songs, and then the actual published albums would have the voices of the others, and Rob and Fab were none the wiser. Actually, their big hit, Girl You Know It's True, was promoted to them as just an instrumental for an album. So Frank didn't even tell them or let them know that it had been recorded with vocals by others. It was just viewed as an instrumental, so that's why they could brush off the fact they weren't recording anything for that track. While it may seem like a nullifying effect when the fans feel betrayed by their favorite artist and the artists feel betrayed by their manager, it was actually the opposite of a nullifying effect, and those things combined served as like a double whammy that exacerbated the sense of betrayal and feeling disillusioned and lied to. In other words, the fallout could have been lessened by the fact that everyone was hurt, and maybe there could be then talk about how to heal because everyone was a victim in the situation. But actually what ended up happening is just like a permanent stain in pop culture history over this incident. Back to Milli Vanilli in a minute. Let's talk about the second story, High School Musical 1. Fans were really shocked to find out that Zac Efron hadn't actually sang Troy Bolton's songs in the first High School Musical movie. That had actually been Drew Seeley, who was hired to record the songs that Zac would lip-sync to as they filmed. All the other cast members, all the other prominent cast members in the first High School Musical got to sing their own stuff, but Zac Efron did not, and Zac claims he was blindsided by that. He didn't realize that someone else was going to be singing for him when he signed on to do this movie, saying that he viewed himself as not necessarily being the best singer, but that he thought he could carry a tune, but apparently not well enough for Disney, who decided to go with a different singer, but still have Zac Efron be the face of the first movie. In this case, every reason fans jumped to explain away what had happened was refuted. So first of all, fans assumed Zac probably was just added to the cast of High School Musical way too late in the game to record songs for the movie, and so they had just been having someone else record in the meantime while they cast their lead. But Zac refuted that by saying that, not even intentionally, but he just ended up talking about something that refuted that, which is that he had done early chemistry reads with Vanessa Hudgens, who ended up being his co-star in that movie and his love interest in the story. So he had been a part of the audition process since the early days, so that was not the reason why he didn't sing. Then some fans just thought maybe he just didn't want to sing, like, we're not going to say no to Zac Efron, so we'll still have him in our movie, but we'll have someone else do his singing then for him. But Zac quashed that theory too, because he's opened up previously about how he actually did fight to make sure he could sing his own stuff for the High School Musical sequel and the third movie. So he did actually get to, after that first movie, when Drew Seeley had done it for him, he had gotten to finally even get a solo song bet on it from the second movie, and then he continued to have a big role singing in the third. And what's interesting about this story are two main things that speak to some larger cultural issues. One is that Zac, through these answers talking about how he had really fought to literally use his voice in these movies, he indicated that fan backlash had not been the cause of the change. In today's world, it would be natural to think that the fan backlash was so intense online, especially, that is why a certain creative direction was taken on a project. But this was back in 2006, so already that wasn't likely because social media was not the ultimate force, at least in terms of fandom activity, that it is today. But Zac also implied then that fans were not the source of the casting change. Zac himself was the one who fought for his right to sing, so it's interesting to think about how that may have affected how people view this entire lip-syncing issue. Because where some people may find it harder to believe, for example, the Milli Vanilli story of how you couldn't be a famous musician for so long and record so much while claiming that you had no idea your voice wasn't going to be used, maybe fans felt like it was a lot harder to forgive that because there could be blame added to the artist and not just on their manager, whereas in this case, all of the blame could go to the manager or the casting director, whoever was involved with the decision, but not Zac himself. So where the blame is placed or not placed can have quite an impact on an artist's career for years and years to come. The second main interesting aspect of this story is the fact that Drew Seeley really got a lot out of this, a lot of fame out of this. He was kind of a famous actor and singer, but he really was not well known or a household name in viewers' lives until after he sang for High School Musical. He even got to, when all of the High School Musical main cast members went on like a concert tour singing the soundtrack, he actually got to be there instead of Zac Efron. So Zac didn't even get to go on tour with the other members. So Drew Seeley got a tour out of it, a lot of name recognition out of it. Eventually, 2 years after High School Musical came out, he also got his own Disney movie, Another Cinderella Story. Technically, the movie was on ABC Family, but that is a channel owned by Disney. So it's very interesting to think about how Disney wanted to make a movie and associate Zac Efron with it, but they also really wanted to push a new artist at the same time that they could use further and cast in future movies and things like that, because Disney does seem to have a habit of that where they never just want to hire an actor for one movie. They like to have recurring actor presences on the network. So a lot of Disney stars end up getting their own Disney Channel movie, or they end up getting a lot of sequels to that movie, or they get a singing career or something like that. Disney really likes to tap into a bunch of different ways that an artist can become known, and at the end of the day, a bunch of different sources of income. So Disney ended up doing that while also having the name recognition already of Zac Efron. But in the process, they inherently built up name recognition for someone else. More on that story as well after I get to the third story, which has to do with Ashlee Simpson's infamous lip-syncing incident. October 24th, 2004 is when Ashlee Simpson performed on Saturday Night Live. She was going to sing a couple songs, and the first song went fine, but when it was time for her to sing the second song, instead of a track for that second song playing, suddenly the first track she had sung looped. And so the vocals were looping back to the first song, and people realized she had been lip-syncing the whole time. This led to so much teasing and media scrutiny, and at the end of the show, Ashlee tried to kind of justify what had happened by blaming her band, really. She threw them all under the bus, which in hindsight was probably not helpful in the situation either, but anyway, she claimed that her band had started playing the wrong song during the second act, so to speak, and that excuse didn't really pan out into a way that helped her PR at all. She initially tried to get through this being, frankly, a laughingstock in the media. She tried to get through that PR nightmare moment by staying quiet about the issue and hoping it would just die out after a few days and people would get tired of talking about the incident. But clearly that wasn't working, and the media continued to kind of make fun of this incident, and especially because her sister Jessica Simpson was already quite famous, and so she had already been held to a higher level of scrutiny as the media tried to accuse her of not really deserving her level of fame in that platform, wondering would she have gotten on SNL if it weren't for her famous sister and things like that. So the media enjoyed watching her downfall, essentially. She called into TRL to try to set the record straight and address the issue once and for all, October 25th. On that call with TRL, she claimed that she had acid reflux the night of the performance, and so it was her dad's idea, and he suggested it's best for you tonight to just sing with backup. Not sure that excuse was actually persuadable to anyone, because it really, frankly, that SNL incident left a permanent stain on her public image as a musician. She had already, like I said, been predisposed to heavy criticism due to being in the shadow, in a way, of her sister in terms of fame, but she also, it felt like people enjoyed what had happened too much to forgive and forget. It felt like people had gotten a kick out of the lip sync moment and just would not accept any excuse for why it happened. They just like to think that it was just flat out lip syncing and laugh about it and not find a way to excuse away their source of laughter here. Ashley did get to perform on SNL again the next year, October of 2005, which went fine, but people actually didn't talk much about that performance. It wasn't viewed as a comeback performance. It was just viewed as, it wasn't really viewed as much at all, frankly. It wasn't really talked about. It was almost like the media had felt let down because she had not messed up the second time. They felt like they had not gotten the laugh they had been waiting for, and realizing that the public was waiting for her to mess up, I'm sure took a hit to her psyche and really further exacerbated the fact that Ashley's singing career didn't ever really recover from this incident. Ashley did release her third album in 2007, which got mixed reviews and very poor sales. It sold around 126,000 copies, and for context, that's pretty much a fraction of what some artists sell in a week, and that was collectively over time what her third album sold. Her own management had actually indicated a lot of lack of trust in her ability to bounce back from this, saying in previous interviews that they thought her career was kind of on the downswing and that it would be, quote, tricky to try to revitalize her singing career and her image in that way. So they kind of just gave up on helping her pursue a music career, viewing it as a lost cause. In 2005, Ashley did try to enter the acting world a bit and had a supporting role in a movie called Undiscovered, but that continued to get her to be laughed at. And she actually won a Raspberry Award, which is like a satirical negative award show event. She won a Raspberry Award for Worst Supporting Actress in it. Ashley had planned a fourth album and had done a lot of work on it. She tried releasing a single off of it in 2012, but it really flopped. No one was very receptive to it. It wasn't talked about, and that fourth album was scrapped and never released. She has released a few singles in the past year or two with her husband Evan, and they go by this musical duo name now, Ashley and Evan, but that's about it. A few singles here and there, and they haven't gotten much public buzz, and people seem to have moved on from thinking about her at all, frankly. And Ashley now seems to be most focused on being a mom and a wife, and not being a singer. That role in her life seems to have taken a backseat, and the effort to try to revive her music career has kind of faded, it seems, with her. Milli Vanilli, Zac Efron, and Ashley Simpson. Why were the fan reactions so different to these issues? What is going on here? We gotta unpack that after the break. When talking about the different reactions fans had to those three major lip sync scandals of sorts, it is impossible to have that conversation in an authentic, deep way without addressing the fact that pop culture is riddled with assumptions driven by internalized misogyny and racism and things like that. I do have a degree in sociology, so hopefully you can still get my broad takeaways of where I'm coming from and how I see this through a sociological perspective about what happened here. Differential treatment and receptiveness to attempts at a comeback have been treated differently based on variables like race and sex for as long as there has been a culture. One of the members who was one of the faces of Milli Vanilli, Rob, said in one interview, quote, "Something clicked between us," meaning him and Fab. "Maybe it's because we're both black people who grew up in foreign cities that don't have too many blacks." They had been sought out because, and this is like when Frank sang for a Caribbean group, he liked to seek out people of other races so that he could show off their beauty and physical attractiveness while also not using all of them, while not letting them be their full selves. He still wanted to control this situation. The power dynamic was really, frankly, messed up here. Europe actually has quite a history of, especially after World Wars, really accepting and celebrating black culture in certain ways. Whereas, like I said, especially after World Wars, soldiers from the USA were feeling such racist treatment in the USA that they had decided to just get away from Jim Crow laws and go to Europe. And not to say discrimination didn't exist there, but it was just different. And they wanted that escape because it was just too much to bear to... They felt so stripped of positive acknowledgement in the USA after they were no longer soldiers. When they were serving in the military, they felt like that was finally, they were recognized as full citizens in ways that they hadn't been before because of racism in America. And so black military members from the USA felt quite relieved when they could go to Europe, and despite not being in the military any longer, they still had that level of respect and dignity given towards them. The problem with that, though, remained that Europe really accepted and celebrated these black performers, but only in certain contexts and, frankly, in ways that lacked context, where Europe has liked to promote itself kind of as a colorblind society, viewing that as ideal. You don't see anyone based on color. The problem with that is that when you say you don't see color, you don't see the people who are that color. So if you say you don't see something, it really automatically shuts you off to ever fully getting all of the nuances that come with that thing you are blocking yourself off to fully understanding. So, to put it in blunter terms, not just Europe, but countries all over the world really do seem to love black culture, but then when it comes to giving away some ownership over how that black culture is interpreted and discussed and viewed and perceived, suddenly things change and there's more resistance. So people like it, but only in a certain amount that they still have control over, in a way where they are still running the show in a way. A shorter way to sum up what I'm trying to get at here is that black artists are able to shake the table as long as they are not at the head of the table. That's kind of how pop culture has worked for a very long time. And with Milli Vanilli, that was the case where they were given that musical opportunity, but as long as they still let Frank have the reins of this project, and they literally were denied a voice in the process. So it was a dream half fulfilled for them, and very symbolic of the appreciation people have for aesthetics involving black art and black artists, but then the aesthetics are the extent of it, as opposed to truly having an interest in seeing those artists get to feel fully liberated and expressive on their own terms. So I think part of the reason why the backlash was so particularly strong that it led to fans filing lawsuits over the Milli Vanilli situation is because there is that race component there, whether that was a conscious or subconscious aspect of the outrage. People who had seen someone who looked like them be famous for their song, that must have been very exciting. And so for black people to see that Milli Vanilli, the singers behind that song, were actually not black, that must have been really a tough blow, especially then when everything unraveled with Frank and they realized how the lack of autonomy over their own careers had been an issue with the faces of Milli Vanilli. Probably felt used just as the faces of Milli Vanilli felt used by the expectations of the mainstream media. So another aspect to talk about here is sexism, which seems to be clearly at play if we contrast the situation between Zach and Ashley, which obviously had a lot of other variables at play, so I may seem to be simplifying it and using really broad terms when talking about it, but I think the lessons still hold and are worth reflecting on here. So with Zach, it was easy to move all of the blame onto the casting director, or whoever had decided Drew Seeley should take Zach's place in terms of singing. So Zach was not faulted for that, and fans seemed to really be excited and encouraged when he did finally start singing for himself. That got a positive reaction from fans, and then he is the superstar actor that he is today. Very, very well known. If anything of that quote-unquote scandal, it actually may have helped his name recognition and popularity, and in the process it also helped another guy's career with Drew. Whereas Ashlee Simpson, I can't even imagine people laughing at finding out Zac Efron didn't sing his own songs in the same way that they relentlessly laughed at Ashlee Simpson's lip-sync situation there, and there is just a lot of internalized sexism with that. Zach's explanation of this is what the casting director said, and I fought for my right to do this, that was viewed as, you go, Zach, just standing up for himself. Whereas when Ashlee tried to say that her band was really responsible for the mishap, people wouldn't buy that and were saying, you know, what are you doing trying to throw them under the bus, which I just said as I was describing the story. That is how it looked. And so we have to keep in mind how a situation looks to us is what infiltrates those perceptions are just internalized misogyny and the like. People can just be subconsciously primed to not believe Ashlee's defenses of her lip syncing and primed to defend Zach and try to support his right to get a comeback, essentially, when it comes to singing. So while Zach went on to have a very thriving career after that incident and got to start singing more on his own, Ashlee never really got that freedom. Her team didn't believe in her ability to deserve that freedom in a way, and her singing career kind of fell apart and was on the downhill ever since that SNL performance. Another interesting thing here to think about, though, is that there are other women who have performed on SNL who have done so and bounced back very significantly, like Lana Del Rey, for example. She had what is known as a very notorious performance on SNL that people were just really thought was absolutely awful, and people really didn't like it, but Lana Del Rey sells out arenas now, so how did she bounce back, but Ashlee Simpson didn't? Again, I think part of it is the fact that people had already painted her as not being self-made in any way, because people viewed her as just having a music career handed to her because her sister was famous. And also, I think with Lana, people felt like at least she was being very hands-on, so she had a bad performance, but it was a performance of a song that she had actually worked on, of music that she's very hands-on in creating, and you could also even go further and say that people viewed it as not even really Lana's work, or rather not Lizzie Grant's work, that's her real name, not Lizzie Grant's work, but Lana's work. So when the onus goes on a different persona, suddenly there's no blame on the person, and their music career can maybe live further if you can blame the persona and not them for any screw-up moments. So Ashlee didn't really have any shields to protect her in the music industry, no alter ego to really have fans rally behind and support. And also with those alter egos, when then an artist sings about stuff that fans are upset by, they can really reconcile that being a fan and hearing that stuff in their mind by saying, well, that was just their persona, that wasn't how they really feel. And Lana can do that in ways that Ashlee cannot. So again, internalized sexism is part of the picture whenever you talk about who did well and who ended up crashing and falling in terms of singing careers, but it's not the whole picture. It's just one aspect that is always there. Those dynamics are just a part of the society we live in. But there are other things that are just involved, and those I find very interesting to reflect on. With Zach, everyone was quickly forgiving and he moved on up in his career. And with Ashlee's situation, fans didn't really respond negatively as much as just she didn't have many music fans to begin with, just by comparison's sake here, where people just wanted to laugh at her and the way she tried to sing. So it's very interesting who we give credibility to and who we immediately judge or write off. I'm not saying that Ashlee did not get a head up in the industry because of a famous sister, but I'm just saying it's interesting to think about how immensely that led to immediately stereotyping and writing off her musical career. and how things may have played out differently if people had no expectations when they went into watching her performance. If they had just gone in watching her and not really thinking about the fact she was someone's famous sister, maybe that would have led to a different outcome. Every lip sync scandal or any pop culture scandal is rooted in a very specific historical context. Because think about it, if Milli Vanilli's lip syncing incident happened in today's world, how would the reaction have been differently? First of all, I think the reaction would have ended up differently because fans would have probably rallied around Milli Vanilli online and would have really smeared Frank for really just betraying the members of the band. He would probably be canceled, or however you want to put it. Fans also may have stuck with the band longer just because of the ease of music access. With all these streaming sites nowadays, they may have just been listening to Girl, You Know It's True and making TikTok remixes of it or whatever, and that song would have stayed alive and kept the band's image alive today. So that's something else that could have happened as a result of a changing time. I also think we would spend more time reflecting on the fact that one of the members, Rob, ended up dying of an overdose and had a really tough life after this whole incident, which certainly contributed to his really negative thoughts and the dark road his life went down. And so I feel like that would be, thanks to more opened up mental health conversations these days, online and offline, Rob's past would be discussed more and tried to be prevented in the future. Frank would definitely be more villainized today and remembered as a villain if that were the case. And I don't think Frank would have been getting any good reception for any rebound projects he did with the quote-unquote real Milli Vanilli. So I don't think fans would really fall for a scheme like this today, but it's interesting to think about how that time period will affect how fans respond to a situation. Similarly, if Zach was in High School Musical today, as opposed to earlier when fandoms were not as powerful, cohesive forces as they are today in making decisions, if fans would have still stuck behind him, or if they would have been mad at Drew Seeley and really been sending him a bunch of hate messages online for taking away Zach's right to sing, or if they would have just kept up the backlash so fiercely online, circulating petitions or something, that it would have led to Zach getting to sing his own songs earlier on. It's interesting to think about how the media changes how the media looks. It's a feedback loop. And in today's era of really reflecting on our internalized assumptions about others, I do think there would also be more media discourse about the Ashlee Simpson 2004 incident if it had happened today, because fans would probably talk about and point out the ways that critics were being too hard on her and contributing to this culture of just cyberbullying of women that is just so disproportional. And people may have more of an ability to see her as a full person and not just Jessica's sister, because she was really going forward with her music career. She may have started a vlog or something, I don't know, but a way to keep connected with fans, and so fans could see another side of her through her social media posts, and then they would see her as more fully human, making them both more likely to support her and feel like they relate to her and want to be a long-term music fan of hers, and second, make them feel like she is so much more than just someone's sister and maybe actually does deserve a good, successful career. So there are three main variables to consider here. One is through this intersectional lens of how we view people of different races and sexes and how that affects how the media shapes what happens to them and what excuses they make for certain behavior deemed scandalous. The second thing to think about is how the historical time period shapes our responses as well. And then the third variable to keep in mind is how integral a role music plays in our memories, which is another interesting way to look at the fallout of these instances and how Zach's was really a bounce up, if any way to bounce, that he fell up after this and the others didn't. The High School Musical soundtrack is such a big part of a lot of people's childhoods. I know it's a big part of mine, and Ashlee Simpson's music is not. The Milli Vanilli song was out before I was born. If a song plays a key role in a memory you have, a very positive memory, then you're more likely to still listen to that artist's future releases and keep up to date on what they're up to and what music they're making, because they have more meaning to you when they've released music that is officially part of your life. It feels like you have a more personalized relationship with them after that happens. Frankly, if I had to just defend one of them, Milli Vanilli, Ashley Simpson, or Zac Efron, and try to like root for them to get a musical comeback, I would have said, frankly, Zac Efron, because to me, when I was younger, I would have said that because he was Troy Bolton from High School Musical, you know? That's who I would be defending for forever and always at the time. That's what I thought, because those movies and the soundtrack were such a huge part of my life. I have memories of dance recitals associated with them, long car rides with that soundtrack, just dance parties in general with that soundtrack. It's just a huge part of my childhood, and so to think of him not getting to sing, I would be very more defensive of him because of that personal memory I have. No matter who it is, though, fans at the end of the day don't like to be betrayed. They don't like to feel lied to or duped in any way, regardless of who is responsible for the deception. But then who we forgive after the deception is revealed is very interesting and revealing about our own culture. Like I said, culture is like a feedback loop that kind of mirrors us. So we can blame society for the downfall of certain artists, but we also are making up the society that we're blaming. So, something to think about. Also, keep in mind that no one likes to be betrayed, but especially when they have skin in the game. And that seems to be the way it is if you're talking about memories you have associated with the music. You have skin in the game sometimes financially, like if you've actually bought those albums, or if you've bought books or paintings by someone who actually eventually was revealed to have been a fraud, you're probably more upset by that revelation than you would be other revelations because of that personal investment, sometimes a financial investment in that artist's career. That is what we are going to address on the third episode of Betrayals, are times where authors were not who they said they were. We've talked about J.T. Leroy, but there are others to talk about, as well as phony artists who actually didn't paint the famous paintings they said they did, and why people reacted so strongly to those. But this kind of gave you a preview of some of the psychology of what I'll try to get into as to why fans reacted the way they did when I tell those stories about those infamous painters and writer posers in the next episode of the show. I hope this story was interesting and caused you to reflect on these moments in pop culture history in a new light. Thank you for listening, and I will talk to you next week.